how did you get into this work? You've been at this for quite some time now.
Yeah, a lot of decades, David.
Yes.
A lot of decades. So let's see, back in the early 80s is when I started doing prevention work. I was in undergraduate school in San Francisco, and I needed to do an internship for graduation. And I really had no idea what I was going to do with a women's studies degree. All I knew is that I was interested in working with children. And so I began to look for internships and look out there, how could I work with children? Simultaneously, I was at home one evening with my roommate, and a television show came on across the TV called Something About Amelia with Ted Danskin. I don't know if you or any of our listeners today have seen that movie, but it was a made-for-TV movie about a dad who was sexually assaulting his 12 or 13-year-old daughter. And truthfully, honestly, at that point in my life, in my early 20s, I knew very little about sexual abuse. I had some friends, I knew, I had a few experiences with people I knew, but very little. And I was riveted. I can't tell you why. I just know that I sat silent for the 90 minutes or 2 hours of the movie. And at the end of the movie, I turned to my roommate and said, that is my life work. And right after that, I found the Child Assault Prevention Project in Berkeley, did my internship there, which was a school program for kids learning about prevention. And after the internship, I worked there 4 more years. They hired me before I went back for my master's work. So that was my entry into child sex abuse prevention.
That's great. It's also strikingly similar to my own experience. And I don't know about you, but I've considered other lines of work, but keep getting called back to this. So
yes, definitely.
all these decades later, I see we've already gotten a comment that that it's a great movie, and that's a take back for sure. Could you repeat the name of the movie again?
Sure. Yeah, it's called Something About Amelia. And I recently watched it again. Actually, I was interested, found it on YouTube. It's a very blurry and hard to watch version of it, but you probably can find it elsewhere. So, yeah, Something About Amelia.
And I see Michael put it into the chat. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Michael. So, so we know how you got into this work. How has your work evolved over time, and what is your approach to prevention?
Love talking about that. So when I was first trained in those early 80s in CAP, Child Assault Prevention, our focus, many prevention programs were focusing similarly on educating children to keep themselves safe from sexual abuse, or empowering children to protect themselves. And while it is important, my belief is that it's important to give children skills, protection skills and refusal skills. It is my firm belief in how my work has evolved from working with children, which I no longer do, to working with adults only, is that adults are responsible for protecting children from sexual abuse. That children can learn protection skills, and it's important that they do. However, ultimately, it is up to us to protect them, not for children to hold the burden and have to live in a world thinking about sex abuse to protect themselves. So my work has evolved from being in a school-based program to starting my own business a couple of decades later, where I do seminars for parents and caregivers, and then youth professionals in schools and youth organizations, helping them with their policies in order to minimize risk and to deter adults who offend working in those organizations. So it's both. It's parents and caregivers, and then youth professionals.
That's so important what you're saying. I'm just thinking back on my own experience of having a couple of kids in Cub Scouts, and in came the police officer to talk to the kids about good touch, bad touch, and all these kinds of things. But I don't recall ever hearing anything about adult responsibility to prevent child sexual abuse. So here in Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Month, I think I got that right.
Maybe you did.
It just seems doubly important to repeat the message, like adults are responsible. It's easy to put into a PowerPoint slide, but it doesn't get talked about enough.
And the other thing, David, you just said, which I'll jump on if it's okay, back then we were using well, CAP wasn't, but many programs, good and bad touch. And that's another way this work, hopefully for most people, professionals in this field, is we don't use those terms any longer.